This billionaire is married to 6 wives and tens of thousands of employees, but he's dying, and not a single person came to see him. And look at the dark-skinned man next to him. He's so poor he can't even pay for his surgery, but his wife is always there for him. The rich man is furious. He insisted on a single room, but he owns the whole hospital, and he himself had laid down a rule early on.
I run hospitals, not health spas. 2 beds to a room. No exceptions.
There was no choice. He had to put up with this poor, dark-skinned man. The rich man gorged himself on the finest cuisine. He wanted to show off how rich he was, but the poor man didn't envy him at all. Instead, he advised him that he had better not eat. The rich man didn't listen to him. He was soon full. In less than 10 minutes, he was in a terrible state. Due to the side effects of chemotherapy, Rich was in unbearable pain every night, and the dark-skinned man did the same. So gradually, the two felt the same way. They accepted each other. The days of treatment were boring. The rich man came up with a great idea. They made a bucket list while they were still alive to fulfill all their regrets. The poor man couldn't resist, so they wrote down a few wishes from their hearts. Help a stranger out of kindness. To see a miracle with my own eyes. Laugh until you cry. That's a bit childish, isn't it? The rich man laughed at him while writing down his wishes. The poor man took the list. He couldn't stop laughing.
Kiss the most beautiful girl in the world? How do you propose doing that?
Volume.
Rich man couldn't wait to take the poor man to fulfill his last wish, but the poor man hesitates. He's dying. Shouldn't he stay at home? But the rich man said it all. If you go home, you're just going to die. And if I go back to work, I'll still have a lot of work to do. Why bother? The poor man has finally made up his mind to be free before he dies. He defied his wife's advice. He followed the rich man onto the plane, but the next moment he regretted it. Billionaire with a terminal illness. But before he died, he wanted to experience the ultimate madness. 10,000 meters up in the air, he kicks his best friend off the ground in a fit of excitement.
Let's hit the seal!
He was so scared that he couldn't stop cursing.
I hate your rock guts!
He's so scared he pulls his parachute out early, but the rich guy is enjoying himself. He's past the warning line and he's still hesitant to pull the rope. The skydiver panics.
Pull the damn cord! I was in love once.
First wish fulfilled. Now it's the poor man's turn. He's dreaming of driving a sports car for once. For the rich man, this was a piece of cake, so he bought 2 Mustangs on the spot without saying a word. Alan was happy as a child. As he sped up, he picked on the rich man, and then he did a tailspin. He had the crowd in stitches. Maybe it was as simple as that for him. Following a bucket list, they set off on a journey around the world. First to Africa, to see the last of the zebra migration. Then they flew to Egypt, seeing the pyramids in the sunset. They rode their motorbikes on the Great Wall. Then they move on to France, in a 5-star hotel on the 138th floor, enjoying a world-class meal. Unknowingly, these two people, so different from each other, with a shared terminal illness, they are getting closer and closer. In the course of a light-hearted conversation, the rich man inadvertently talked about his daughter. The poor man was amazed that you had a daughter. Why did you never mention it? It turns out that a few years ago, she fell in love with a violent boyfriend. She was often bullied by him. The father couldn't stand it, so he hired someone to teach the boy a lesson. But when the daughter found out, she broke off the relationship with her father. The poor man felt very sorry for her, and he could see that. He could see that although the rich man had a tough mouth, and he was still missing his daughter. So he grabbed the list. He added a wish for the rich man to meet his daughter. The rich man was furious. He crossed it out with a pen. In his opinion, taking the initiative to apologize to his daughter was harder than making $1 billion. The poor man's wife called out of the blue. He begged for the immediate return of his husband. The rich man has no choice. He had no choice but to agree. But after a few days of madness, the poor man finally realized that this was the real life. So he turned down his wife and decided to live for himself. And he knew very well, even if he returned home, he would only drag others down. The two of them came to the foot of Mount Everest. They wanted to reach the summit and witness a miracle. But the weather was not good. The weather was predicting a snowstorm that would last 3 months. So it seemed that this wish would be a last wish. Finally, they flew back to China, landing in a bar in Hong Kong. The poor man could never have imagined. In the last few months of his life, in a strange and foreign land, they had their first encounter of their lives. Old man with a terminal illness is approached by a beautiful woman.
I have a room upstairs.
Faced with this unexpected encounter, he was stunned, not too happy. Instead, he was very grateful.
I appreciate that.
The old man stammered. He didn't know what to say for a moment, but the look of embarrassment on his face already signaled rejection.
She's a very lucky woman.
Well, I rather think I'm the lucky one.
Good for you.
In fact, the poor man had already sensed this must have been arranged by the rich man. After all, who would look at an old man? They say a man is a young man until he dies. But this young man, who has been through the ages, has learnt his duty and responsibility. He wants nothing more now. He just wants to go home and see his wife, to see his children. Although the rich man doesn't understand, but he chose to respect it. So the two of them left immediately for home. But the assistant pulled up in front of the rich man's daughter's house. It turns out, the poor man had asked for it. He wanted to help his friend find the only family love he had. But this angered the rich man completely. He accused the poor man of being presumptuous, interfering in his own family's affairs. He built his business from scratch. He built a business worth tens of billions of dollars. Even the current president has asked him for advice. It's just a matter of dying alone. What is there to fear? With that, the rich man pulled out his bucket list and angrily tore it up. But faced with an empty villa, the rich man could not help but weep helplessly. He didn't want to get back together with his daughter, but he didn't have the courage to bow down, and he was truly afraid of rejection. The poor man returns home. The family is happy. Compared to the madness of the past, seems happier now in peace. The wife has prepared a surprise. She hides in her room to change her clothes and comes out with enthusiasm. But then her husband had a sudden attack. He fell to the floor in convulsions. The rich man rushes in with the news, only to find his friend dying. His hair was shaved off, preparing for his last operation. But he was optimistic because after seeing his family, he had no regrets. The poor man pulls out a piece of paper. It says the most expensive coffee in the world. Cat shit coffee. It's made from the feces of musk cats. And this top coffee is the favorite of the rich and famous.
You're shitting me.
Cats bit me to it.
Poor man pulls out his pasted list, crossing off another wish. He laughed until he wept. He gives the list to the rich man. I'm sure the rest of it. He had to do it all by himself. And then the poor man didn't make it through the operation. He passed away peacefully. With his encouragement, the rich man finally made up his mind to knock on his daughter's door. He put aside his face. He let go of everything. He sincerely apologized to his daughter. And in fact, she had already forgiven her father. He knelt down in excitement. He hugged his granddaughter with affection. And so, that ridiculous wish to kiss the most beautiful girl in the world had also been granted. At the funeral, the rich man pulled out his folded list. He crossed off the poor man's last wish with tears in his eyes, helping a stranger out of the goodness of his heart. They were strangers to each other, but they saved each other's families and happiness. Isn't that the greatest kindness of all? 2 months later, the rich man also left this world. He asked his assistant to climb Mount Everest and place his ashes and those of the poor on the summit. In this way, they would have fulfilled their last wish to see the miracle with their own eyes.